You're all very welcome today, and for the new faces, and there are a good few. My name is Charlie Tuxworth, and I'm one of the co-founders of Innovate Island. Innovate Island is a collaborative network that has its roots in very informal coffee shop meetings, where a couple of us would meet up, drink way too much coffee, and then share our innovation stories, our challenges, our worries, and our aspirations. These meetings tended to act as therapy for us as well, and they provided us with quite a safe place to discuss, share ideas, and pick up some inspiration. When we realized just how valuable that was, being able to do that, and how little support there was actually out there for people like us, so people who are implementing innovation in established businesses, eventually that led to the creation of Innovate Island. And we've now become the all-island go-to community for practitioners, advocates, and explorers of innovation. Innovate Island provides forum for some really great content, best practice, and thought leadership as well. And we're now representing almost 350 members' views and their ambitions at a national and an international level as well. For policymakers, academics, agencies, we provide a route to the skills and perspectives of innovation practitioners, enthusiasts, and advocates. And we are completely non-commercial. So if you are involved in any way with innovation as a student, practitioner, or advisor, based on the island of Ireland or in a similar network elsewhere in the world, and we have representation today from similar entities, if you like, in Trinidad and Tobago and Sweden, just to name a couple. So if you are involved, then check us out on LinkedIn or check out innovateisland.net or connect with me on LinkedIn. One of the benefits of having an unusual surname is that I think I'm the only one on LinkedIn, so you should find me easily enough. Our special guest for today is a truly international speaker. Ron Immink is a Dutch Irishman who spent many years in Ireland working with universities, government departments, public agencies, and hundreds of businesses, building a very broad spectrum of perspectives on how to run businesses in really complex environments. He has since moved to sunnier climes. He's probably the only person on the call who's just wearing a t-shirt. And now lives and works in Spain. And on top of his speaking and commercial engagements, he writes books about books, and he also helps other people to write books too. As a part of that, Ron reads thousands of books, or tens of thousands of books, and we're delighted to have him here today to share his views and insights into just a few of the huge arrays of innovation books that are available. So Ron is going to take center stage for about 20 to 30 minutes, the normal format for these sessions. And then, as usual, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion before we close out at 2 o'clock GMT to give you the rest of the afternoons to close out before the weekend. So Ron, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today and to be with us today. And if it's okay with you, I'll hand over to you now.
Perfect. And it's my pleasure, Charlie. I'm actually delighted. I managed the Innovation Center in DCU, and for a while we had an innovation panel in DCU. And I know how hard it is for innovators to get a foothold in particularly Ireland. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And if you bear with me. I wrote a book. So myself and Frank and a few others did a study of best practice in intrapreneurship, and based on that, it's a cheap trick. I read all those books, I write blogs about those books, and then I write a book about books. And this is a book about innovation, fitness, and the development of what I call the change muscle. So what I'm going to do is, there's 24 of them. I'm just going to briefly talk through them. I will give you some trends that I think are interesting. I will try to distill it into something, and actually what you distilled is absolutely nothing new there. There's no point to reinvent the wheel. All the tools are there. I have a question, because why is innovation so hard? And that might be open for a nice discussion. And then maybe if I have time, share some tools that I always use. And because the research we did was particularly on innovation and entrepreneurship within SMEs, is why and how could we help SMEs to innovate better? So if you look at the book flower, which you 24 books, I use what we call a book flower. the book will be made available to all of you, so you can read all the books and the summaries of all those books. I'm not going to go through them in much details. What I am going to do is just highlight some of the things that I think are interesting and cool. And just to remind, and it's something I've been involved in climate change, and I work. So the idea, it's Sustainable Nation, and the idea with Sustainable Nation was we will support startups to come up with really cool ideas to tackle climate change, and we get those startups to scale. And what you find, it doesn't matter what you do, is that scaling a startup takes a tremendous amount of time. And the time horizons are between 10 and 15 years before it truly scales. And if you then look at large companies, they have all the things that startups don't have. They have the distribution channels, they have the customers, they have the money, they have the talent. So why would we not get large companies to adopt startup principles and really make an impact with climate change? So we set up an intrapreneurship accelerator in the area of climate change, and we started that just before COVID, and we failed miserably getting that off the ground, but it's still something that I'm really interested in developing. Now, change muscles and entrepreneurship and innovation are all part of the same spectrum. And if you read all those books, there's a few things that sort of come to light almost instantly. And the first one is that the exponential effect that the developments that we're currently seeing is not linear. It is exponential, which means that is rocket boosters behind nearly every technology. And just today, have you heard of OI? So we have AI, and now we have OI. Does anybody know what OI is? Take a guess. Organoid intelligence, which you now have like brain cells connected into parallel computing. And they found a term for it, which is OI. So the amount of technology, and that's interchangeable with robotics, with nanotechnology. It is one big fogfest of technology, and it's just going with rocket boosters. So it's VUCA on steroids. And what is really interesting, if you follow, I work with the CEO of the Project Management Institute, and we were adopting low-code, no-code and project management. And low-code, no-code is a typical example of technology abstraction, which is you can play Lego with software. You have a business problem, you take the building blocks, and anybody, you don't need to be a software developer, can literally play with the building blocks and build software and deploy it on an enterprise platform, and that problem is solved forever. That's happening with software. ChatGPT is the example of technology abstraction with AI. That will happen with genetic engineering, synthetic biology, 3D printing, robotics, etc., etc., etc. So it is pretty fundamental that the speed of technology is just going to go faster and faster, and in itself becomes exponential. And I think it's nearly existential. And if you read lots and lots of books, there now really is the point that if AI becomes sentient, and if we reach singularity, what is the role of humans? And that's before we start talking about climate change and other things that are happening all at the same time. And what's really interesting then in that context is that politicians seem to be incapable. Most of the institutions that we work with are incapable. That the agents of change is very likely to be enterprise and business. This becomes very, very important. So if you then follow the books, and I can give you a long list of all the things that are super interesting. So I will just highlight a few. The first one, and that's Boris with Undisruptible, is that trends are actually predictable. And he uses a distinction, what he calls hard trends and soft trends. And hard trends are things such as demographics and regulation, and some technologies such as AI, robotics, and 3D printing, you can probably say are hard trends. Blockchain is probably a hard trend, and soft trends could be Bitcoin. And if you start making that distinction, that makes life incredibly easy for you to follow. And even there, when you talk to companies, they have huge difficulties in distincting between the different trends. If you just follow as a company the hard trends, you're already doing really, really well. Another is Day After Tomorrow is a book about, if you read any book from the list, that's probably the book to read, is why are companies not built like rainforests, which is nature, where everything evolves, all kinds of things are constantly evolving and super, super fluid in the way. And he also uses the distinction between solid, fluid, and superfluid, which is an interesting perspective on the way you zone innovation. And I will come back to that later. The Day After Tomorrow is, and I think this is a constant theme, that it is innovation and entrepreneurship are all about knowing the terrain and knowing the map that you're operating on. And I think lots and lots of companies are incredibly poor on understanding the terrain they're actually operating on. There is the whole area of, obviously, and that's Undisruptible, which is Adam McCullen's book. So I believe he spoke. Awesome book, full of metaphors, and it's this constant reinvention, or and as the only way forward. The area of risk, and then not only the risk of assessing the risk of the innovations that you're investing in, but also the risk of not innovating. And when we talk about SMEs, particularly in an Irish context, an SME in Holland it goes up to 250. An SME in Ireland is probably between 1 and 10. The risk of innovation for an Irish SME is disproportional, and the opportunity cost that they have to bear is disproportionate as well. So for innovations, particularly small companies, innovation is a huge risk. All the research shows that employees are the source of most of the ideas. So why are we not using them better? And immediately linked to that is this whole theme of innovation theater, where lots of companies pretend to be innovating, but they're not. And it's all a smokescreen. It's like innovation washing, if you want to give it a phraseology. The ability to create the options, identify the blockers, and most important, the importance of action, the importance of creating a flow. There's some fascinating books on the whole area of flow. And one of the things that companies are now starting to score is flow score, which is how much as an organization are we in flow. And then an organization that's in flow is much more likely to innovate and come up with new ideas. Embracing the weirdos. So in our case, all have a conversation with Frank Hannigan. That will be a great starting point to engage with some really wacky individuals. Creating space, the whole area of soft structures, which is trying not to create something hard and solid in an organization structure, but actually develop soft or fluid type of structures. Pick an idea, develop a short structure around that idea, and let it evolve and develop. The importance of diversity, obviously, the whole point of accountability, which is innovation is not only a really interesting sport, contact sport, but that doesn't mean that you can just do willy-nilly. There has to be an element of accountability in everything you do within innovation. The area of simplicity, and then what I think is super interesting is the difference between ideas and the importance of engineering, and the complete difference between those two timelines. Because engineering, as the engineers know in this room, is really, really hard and takes a lot of time. And there's a complete disconnect between ideas and engineering. 6 degrees of competition. And so Netflix, obviously the first level of competition is other streaming platforms. but they go very, very deep, and it's sometimes it's like with the jobs to do. So their ultimate competition for Netflix is sleep. And if you step into that space, you get some really interesting perspectives of what you could potentially develop. The importance, and this goes back to of environment and the design of your office, and the importance of drinking coffee with others, which is just active serendipity. The what they call islands of freedom, which is an interesting concept if you visualize it. Innovation friction. So what gets in the way of innovation? The importance of networks, and I think something very, very fundamental, which is the ongoing problem of the clock speed of a organization internally, aligning that with the clock speed with the external environment. And that is super, super hard when you know that everything is developing at exponential rate on steroids. So how do you merge those type of speeds all at the same time? And that's in itself hard. And I wrote another book, which is actually maybe rather than trying to go faster, maybe we should go slower. And maybe you should go back to the core of who we are as businesses, which brings you to things like such as purpose. And I will come back to that later, because I don't think most of us can beat Microsoft or Amazon or Apple or IBM or Tencent on technology development. We can only respond to that. The chance of us developing any of that technology is slim to none, which is also super scary, because from all those books that you constantly read around, particularly around technology trends, is winners takes all. And that's a pretty scary prospect if you talk about where the world is going. So there's a number of trends and examples, and the obvious ones are hire. And anybody familiar with hire? Chinese company, entrepreneurship in its purest form, a completely self-organizing structure where employees are constantly allowed to express themselves as entrepreneurs, with a support structure that allows those entrepreneurs to flourish, but also with the accountability that if they don't flourish, the thing gets killed. So the market constantly decides what happens, and there's a constant element of experimentation in what they do. So they are incredibly close to the market. And if you talk about clock speed, I think one of the solutions to dealing with clock speed is organization structure, because a hierarchical structure is not going to work in modern times, because it's just the decision making is too slow. There's a book called Humanocracy by Gary Hamel, which is, and I work with John Ryan, who's created a concept called Healthy Place to Work, which is about making humans much more central within business rather than the business itself. Holacracy, which is self-organizing, which is the organization structures. I think citizen development is super interesting, which is just how do you deal with technology abstraction. So if everybody can play Lego within your organization, how important does culture become? Because then you have positive citizen development, or you have disruptive and dark citizen development. And if you have a rotten culture, you have rotten citizen developers. But citizen development as a source of innovation for everybody is, I think, the way it is going to go. And particularly when you combine you playing Lego as employees for your company, but also your customers playing the same Lego, because Lego by its nature is interchangeable. The makers movement, and it's a really interesting, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Fab Labs. And there was a book, I just finished a book from 2017 that was prospecting that this was fundamentally changed the world of manufacturing and distribution. And actually 3D printing and its development has been super disappointing if you think about it. But Fab Labs and 3D printing and building prototypes is a pretty interesting prospect. And there's no question in my mind that 3D printing and fab labs are going to fundamentally change distribution structures, and we're going to go back to local production and local making. So how is that going to impact your business world? Open source, co-creation. I think the whole area of science fiction. I tell all my clients that they should read at least one science fiction book a year, because science fiction is literally becoming science fact. There's just no question about that. And then there is a Dutch professor is why don't companies not all build their own rally car, which is just a super project that they put all their best in as a way to start helping to innovate. If you distill all of this, just another thing I do is, and that's the whole area of failure. So I now ask all the innovation managers that I work with, what's their failure fund? How much money are they actually allowed to lose? Because I think without experimentation and failure, it's not going to work. But if you distill it down, it's hard. No, you can find it when you read, if you're going to read the summaries of the 24 books, it's all there. There really is no need to reinvent the wheel whatsoever. All the techniques, tools are readily available. So why is it not happening? There is definitely something around the zones. So are you incremental or disruptive? Is it a 1 year horizon or is it a 5 year horizon? And is it operational or strategic or tactical? So there's a number of tracks on which you can plot the innovation. Is it fluid, solid, or superfluid? Is it challenge X or is it continuous improvement? There's the spectrum that you can, but you need to know in which zone you're playing. And I'm not necessarily sure that you can mix those different zones. The importance of organization, structure, and management. I think, and I'm sure Charlie knows, well, you know, for sure, you know more than I do, it's a deliberate process. There's nothing accidental. There should not be nothing accidental about innovation whatsoever. And again, all the techniques are there. The importance, I talked about experimentation, the importance of a portfolio. There's a book called Idea Flow that claims that the only metric you have to focus on as a company is how many ideas are you capable of producing within a certain time frame. So how many ideas do you have in portfolio, the area of dashboard and metrics, and ultimately I think it is all about culture as the platform, and innovation is not something that is individual. Innovation is something that's collective, which brings me to the question, which is the next slide. Why is this so hard? It shouldn't. And all the tools, so all the mechanics are there, but for some reason we don't seem to be able to execute on innovation. And this is an open question. And are we maybe starting at the wrong place? Because so there is nothing stopping from people within your company to go and innovate and come up with new ideas. All the tools are there. So why is it not happening? And I think it's to do with understanding purpose. I think that's something that's completely underestimated in the context of innovation. I think it is about passion and joy. I think not enough people within the organizations understand the context and the environment that they operate in. And it is about clarity and strategy before anything else. And I think there's just too much focus on the mechanics and not enough focus on the culture. And I think the problem there is, particularly when you start talking about intrapreneurship is a super quick process, but culture is a very long process. And I think that's where it always goes wrong. The problem with innovation is not the tools. The problem with innovation is the culture and the understanding of the purpose and all the other things. And as I was sitting in the garden in the sunshine, I think once you have that, you have, I think, 3 elemental directions, particularly for an SME, and that is super niche. And there's a book, I will share it with you. But it tells the stories of particularly German companies who are incredibly successful in tiny niches and are completely embedded within the value chain. So you can either become a super nichist, you can identify an island of opportunities. If you take the sailing metaphor, and that's Frank's fault from the days that I spent in Malaga, or you sail to America and hope you end up in America. And I think those are the fundamental directions that you have, and only then do you decide on the tools. I'm not going to bore you with some of the tools that are available, but then the last slide, Charlie, if you don't mind, is SMEs are the change agents. Theoretically, they should be the quickest at innovation, and they are not. And I'm sure, are you familiar with Mondragon in the Basque region? Why is innovation not a cooperative? Why are we not setting up innovation co-ops? Why are we not setting up if you have a cluster or a sector, why don't we collectively appoint an innovator or an innovation manager or an innovation?
Oh, no, he's frozen. We lost Ron, or is it just me?
No, he has frozen, I think, for all of us.
Okay, we'll give him a second to.
Yeah, and he was just getting around to blaming Frank again. I just know it. I could just feel that coming.
He's trying to get across too many ideas in a very short period. That's clogged up the interwebs.
Now this wasn't me. I didn't push any button. It just disappeared, which shows you how shit Microsoft is. But why are there always startup hackathons? Why is there not an SME hackathon where you merge the experience management team with some cool young dudes that co-create something together? Why are there no intrapreneurship accelerators? We have all those startup accelerators, but why is there not an SME accelerator for intrapreneurs or innovators? And I think there's one of the things I've been trying to work on for a while. Why can't we sandbox innovation by asking large companies to give some interesting challenges with a guaranteed commercial pilot if you deliver the solution? So you take some of the risk out of the innovation, and it baffles me. And so Frank and I did some research. There is no intrapreneurship policy at all in Europe. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting. So there's a focus on startups, there's a focus on large companies, but the SME and their natural ability to be entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial is something we're not galvanizing at all. Anyway, that's sort of in fast tempo some of the things that I've read and thought about.
That's absolutely fantastic, Ron. Thank you so much for that. And I have to say, personally, it was so reassuring to hear somebody say some of the stuff that just goes on in my head. There is a major issue, certainly in Northern Ireland, and I do believe it's much broader than that. That innovation is equated to invention. So if you are not startup or you're not R&D, then you're not innovating. And that definition is just so narrow at the moment that it causes massive problems because it means funding isn't there, political support isn't there, because people simply don't get it. So to kind of, for you to kind of, we
had the conversation about the innovation is a polluted word. There is actually, have you heard of the Adaptability University? So rather than calling it innovation IQ, they've developed this called the Adaptability IQ. So AQ. And I don't think innovation, I think innovation is lovely, but it's actually adaptability that you're talking about. Hence the title, which is Change Muscle. This is an ongoing thing that you need to literally pump through your organization all the time.
Absolutely. It's that ability to think differently and act differently It doesn't matter what it's called. You need to be able to change an organization. So I mean, I could monopolize this conversation. I'm not going to do that. There are some questions in the chat which I will have a read through. Now, I'm not fighting the technology, but in the meantime, Alan, if you want to sort of ask away, and then Owen, if you come in afterwards.
Yeah, delighted. Listen, Ron, that was great. I think we can watch the video back at sort of half speed and just let some of those ideas kind of sink in a little bit.
Yes.
It was a great shotgun blast. I have to say, you have been kind of living, like Charlie said, you've been living in the same sort of territory mentally that I have as well for the last while. You know, I'm a kind of a voracious reader, and it's really just two streams. It's kind of science fiction and business books, and where they overlap. My wife keeps telling me I should just read a bloody Grisham or a Dostoevsky or whatever, but stop reading these things that are messing with my head. The sustainability thing is very important to me, as the other guys on the call probably know.
Yeah.
And from an innovation point of view, I liked a lot of the things that you had to say about slower and purpose and all of these kind of good things. But there's a fundamental kind of a tension between innovation, which in general leads to new stuff being created and new resources being used up and all of those kind of things, which is in kind of direct, you know, it's not where we want to be going in terms of consumption of natural resources, consumption of energy and capital and all those kind of things. I've been fascinated by this concept of degrowth. That's where I came across kind of Mondragon and some of those other kind of economic entities that are all cooperatives and looking at slower ways of doing business. But short of, you know, bicycle repair cafes and cooperative things like that, you know, there are very few serious, large, influential business models that are embracing this let's make less stuff. I mean, it's almost kind of, it's almost like the arrow doesn't go that way on the graph, you know. So I think, you know, I see huge challenges which can be addressed by innovation methods, innovation approaches, innovation mentality, in terms of trying to fix business models, economic models, societal models, consumption patterns, supply chains, just to use less stuff, to be less wasteful. Not just the circularity and the regenerative stuff, but I think that, you know, we've got to un-innovate or innovate or whatever. There's probably a book about that, which if there isn't, we should probably all write one. Like, what are your thoughts on trying to innovate when it's not the latest greatest razor blade or the latest greatest mobile phone or electric scooter? It's just less.
So I work with Climate-KIC and Trinity College on a circular construction accelerator, and see, part of innovation and entrepreneurship is also your ability to predict the future, because that's what's missing all the time. And if you want to predict the future, and if you accept that climate change is a hard trend, and if you accept that regulation is coming down the track, suddenly degrowth. Actually, the ultimate conclusion is that the economic model that we're at the moment applying is no longer fit for purpose. So if regenerative becomes part of your, so if the business models take in the natural capital cost, so you will have to pay for the plastic that you leave, if you will have to pay for the carbon that you leave, it's already happening. If you have to pay for the water at full cost, if you have to pay for the full impact at restorative level of your business model, and you have to calculate it into your business model, we're all going bankrupt. But that's where it's going to go. That means that we're going to apply different type of economic metrics to the business models of the future. In those business models, this will all fit. And we're going to, I think, a transition phase where those things at the moment, because there's huge interest. You know, we have to close 100 companies down and we have 80% of our carbon emissions solved. No problem. But at the moment, that is not sustainable. By the time New York is on the water, or Amsterdam, it will become a sustainable model because there will be no other option. And that's when those things will start. So it is the framing of, and if you talk about cannibalism, so you can apply two business models. Let's just take one where we make normal money. And maybe you should also almost instantly and immediately take a circular and a regenerative business model and see how that works. And I think ultimately, but I'm an optimist, the regenerative business models are going to work. But if you want to, there's a book called it's called Deep Adaptation. and they have developed a new science within universities, and it's called collapsology. And collapsology is basically, listen, we looked at all the climate change indicators. We passed the 4 tipping points. They're all accelerating tipping points. We're fucked. It's too late. Let's accept that society is collapsing, and let's just focus on making sure that humanity survives.
Yeah, this
See,
is Jim Vendel's,
yes.
Jim Vendel's
Yeah.
paper,
And
then, is a very depressing read.
Well, so the other book, so after that, Fab Labs and growing and making at local level with 4D printing, where we control things that maybe could save the whole planet. Who knows? And it's this constant exponential technology and exponential climate impact, and hope to God that technology wins, and then that you are a technology optimist all at the same time. But I think fundamentally business models will shift, and you can already see it in regulation. And if you look at some of the EU plans and how they are punishing carbon and water, that will happen with plastic, that will happen with all kinds of other climate impacts. Soil erosion, Sadhguru. We have about 20 years of soil, or 20 years of crops left before we just starve to death because we won't have the minerals to sustain ourselves. Anyway, just let's keep it cheerful.
Cheerful but dead.
Owen, do you want to come in on that?
Well, I think I do have a couple of questions, but it's quarter to the hour, Charlie. A couple of questions asked quite a while ago in the chat would be a good place to start, I think. Martin was first in on the solid fluid superfluid. That's worth another dig, Ron. Can you expand? Can you clarify? Can you give an example?
Okay, so probably the best way to describe it is solid would be operational and short. Fluid has a timeline of 5 years and is more strategic, and superfluid are the loon shots. One doesn't go without the other. I think that's so particularly for large companies, you can't afford to focus on just one. You have to do all 3 of them. And superfluid, so how do you predict the success of something that's superfluid? That's why if you know that the world is fundamentally changing, how could you put any type of metric on some of the innovations that you can, because none of us can predict the future. And so you need to, from nature, you need to build a lot of things from the soil, or you actually need to create a fertile soil and hope to God that one of the plants, let 1,000 flowers bloom, that one of the flowers becomes a tree, and that becomes the foundation for your next business model. Does that explain it?
Martin, that was your question.
Oh, I can't see him on the call now. He must have dropped off.
Fair enough. Okay, so then let me share something that I saw the other day. I saw a quote, and it was presented as if it was in a newspaper article. I haven't found the newspaper. It might not be a real newspaper article. To the effect that adding 1% to your core beats innovation any day. I haven't found the source for this really. I've dug a couple of layers deep. I don't know where it comes from. It sounds like marketing kind of speak. But have you heard that kind of backlash, Ron? Have you heard that kind of argumentation? Can you see anywhere that's coming from?
No, but I think going back to the core is something that you see quite a lot. And I think Patagonia is an example. That's the canary in the coal mine of something fundamentally shifting, and everything is action and reaction. So the example I always use is we have an enormous amount of technology in our homes. What do we have on our floors? Wood. So we're going back to nature, and I think if you look at so Liana, my partner, is into Ayurveda. So lots of Eastern philosophies are starting to become popular. Meditation is becoming popular. There's a really interesting shift to a completely different perspective on how technology contributes to the quality of our life. And again, that's a fundamental existential question. Do you think ChatGPT is going to make us happier? Actually, today on the Mind Candy that the scenario prompts that I'm developing for today, they studied the impact of the iPhone on society. So what's the biggest impact that iPhone has had on society?
Less reading.
Isolation. Isolation. So Facebook has caused an epidemic of mental disease. So there's some really hard questions we need to ask ourselves about all this onslaught of technology. The idea of OI, organoid intelligence, scares the living daylight out of me. And there was a movie once, a Dutch movie, The Lift, where a biocomputer was controlling the lift. And obviously, the biocomputer became schizophrenic and became a homicidal maniac. And anybody that stepped into the lift, their head got chopped off of their arms, whatever. Horror. I think some of the stuff, this really should question what are we focusing. The insanity of artificial meat, the insanity of an artificial leaf. The most effective leaf is a leaf. The best way to solve carbon is a tree. So why would we want this whole area of biomimicry in nature? All the solutions that you can possibly come up with have already been invented in nature. Hence the rainforest analogy. It's just some of the stuff we're doing is just completely insane. If we just go back to the core of who we are as humans, the caveman principle, we are herd animals and we like to be nice to each other, maybe that would put us into a completely different correction. The economic model that we're applying at the moment is fundamentally wrong, and the model that Bhutan grows happiness product, maybe that's where we should look at. And innovation, if done correctly, back to purpose and meaning and joy, is the way to do it. Sorry, rant, speech.
No, that's good, excellent. Thank you. So there's a lot, obviously there's a lot going on in there in the conversation the last few minutes as well. But I mean, Paul, going back to a comment that Paul made in the chat a little bit earlier on, that everything that we do now, the way we structure is designed to optimize what we do today. And I know it's a slight sort of segue, but it's, and that's one of the reasons that innovation is perceived to be so difficult, because we can't set the measure for the moonshots and the going across the Atlantic, we're sailing for New York or whatever. And that's getting on my hobby horse. That's the need for strategy, you know, and why innovation requires a strategy to sit around the ideation process, which is what every university teaches. It's how do you get an idea and commercialize it? Well, there's all this other stuff that allows you to see a little bit further than just the next iteration. That's going to be so key for it, and it's the bit that I think gets overlooked. Sorry, it's me just ranting there for one. Emerson, Michael, a couple of new faces today. Do either of you want to come in? Give you the opportunity to speak. If not, that's okay, but I'll give you a second there if you want to. If there's a question you want to ask.
Yes, good day, everyone. I have more of a comment. In terms of Trinidad, I said I'm starting up my consultant agency. In terms of which group to start with, whether it's corporate, SMEs or startups, the government has a lot of programs and supports for startups. They don't do anything, no policies at all for corporate Trinidad and Tobago, nor the SME space. Quite a few corporate organizations have innovation departments, but to me, it's a lot of innovation theater. And the persons who are in charge are, you know, in the land of the blind, the one-eye man is king. their one eye has cataracts, but the person is So I was just speaking to a CEO friend of mine, and he was saying it's best to go to the SMEs, those medium-sized organizations that still have an entrepreneurial drive, but they really want to have that pressure to change and to survive. So that's the new tactic that I'm going to move forward from and look to develop from yesterday, actually.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for that.
I can say a couple of words. I've been actually writing a lot about these things, never published, but I have a huge bucket with stuff at my home, and my experiences from middle-sized to large companies, and the question why can't we, push these things out? Why is so hard and so on? And there were, you said, understanding the purpose, passion and joy. Other do not understand the context, blah blah blah, and clarity and strategy. And I totally agree. But it's one thing that I think is super important in all of this is like the leadership and the management. If it's not supported there, it's never going to happen. And that is, for me, when I have been like researching all of this, it's like the key. And it's measurements that they don't understand about within the innovation framework, and no matter how you set it up, but if you have a framework and you set it up, and how you're going to measure, how you're going to promote these kind of players that are within the this kind of bucket that we call innovation. And so I've been writing a lot about that, and I've also been writing a lot about how you strategically put innovation to work within the organization. There's a lot of theories on, design thinking, that each product area should have their own, incremental setup, blah, 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 and so on. So I would like to talk a lot about this and, get feedback on my thoughts and so on, but we're not going to be able to do that because it's like 4 minutes left or something like that. So
But
maybe
I
you
think,
can come back.
But isn't the seed of destruction by the Navy SEALs or the Special Forces are really interesting when you talk about leadership, because they always pick collective leadership so it's the right person stepping forward when they need to step forward. And if it's dependent on a person or a management team, therein immediately lies the problem of the way innovation is being organized. Because I think innovation is a collective responsibility that shouldn't need leadership at all. It should be an automatic.
But let me put it like this. I need to drop off in a minute, but when I'm talking about leadership, and it's from the point that we hire people that most of the time is staying like 3 years, and everything is going to die if we don't do anything. And that's where innovation comes into play. If you want to keep your company for amount of years, and then you need innovation or something else that is pretty close to innovation. And if you have workers that are coming in, and managers that are squeezing the P&L out of these 3 years and leave, and they get their bonus on year 2 or year 3, it's not going to happen. So that should be paid out 5 years later when the effect comes into play. So when I'm talking about leadership, this is all about the leadership. When I'm talking about leadership, it's not like something else. It's like how you are interesting to bring value to the company so it survives, or even better, do 10x, 20x, or whatever, because of your innovative program, or So I really need to drop off, but I would love to talk about this more. But I really need to drop off. So
Michael, keep in touch.
We'll be here.
Michael, keep in touch with us. And if you would like to use this as a forum to bounce your ideas around, let us know. You'd be very welcome to do that. So, Ron, we're about 3 minutes left. Is there anything you'd like to sort of say before I kind of wrap up for the day?
I enjoyed it. I do have a tendency to get carried away, so my apologies for that. And I know I talk way too fast, so my apologies for that as well. So, and anybody that has any questions or want to shoot the breeze, I'm always open for a good conversation. And it's actually pity that the guy because there's some really interesting stuff around leadership, quantum leadership, intuitive leadership. There's some. So I think even the way leadership is being approached is starting to. If you're an optimist, you can see a lot of developments happening in which companies are becoming way more responsive and interesting to human beings and the environment.
Good stuff. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I will, because I was fighting with the technology, I'm going to be having a good read as I edit this and put it up on YouTube later on. So just to kind of very quickly wrap up, just say thank you, everyone. Emerson, I know we've got a quick word from you. Do keep in touch. I know you're on the TC committee for the ISO. We're doing some stuff around competency frameworks at the minute, which we will be talking about in coming weeks. That might be of interest to you, because it's about individuals rather than innovation experts and getting innovation into SMEs. And I suppose there was a question up there: why is innovation hard? You know, personally, I think it's because people keep telling us it is. It's a bit like riding a bike or swimming. It's hard until you know how to do it, and then it's actually pretty easy. But if nobody tells you how to do it, it's just impossible. So we've got to take the cloaks off, get the consultants to stop doing magical incantations, and making it sound more complex than it is, and actually helping and facilitating rather than selling days is my my podium piece for this afternoon. So thank you everyone so much for sort of coming along. Ron, did you say there's a link that we're going to be able to do for a download?
Yeah, so I sent you there's a link, and if you type in Innovation Island, you can get the book for free.
Right, excellent. All right, thank you very much, and I'll put that for attendees and make it available to them. So thank you everyone. Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend.
And
Bye-bye.
we'll see you again here soon. Cheers. Thanks very much.
Well done, everybody. Bye.